So, just what is happiness anyway? Come on in and let's talk about it. Hi, this is Christine L. Conroy. Welcome to Happy Stuff and Fluff, a channel for women over 50 who are getting happy and growing younger. So what is happiness? I guess this is a video I should have done earlier on, but instead I wanted to get you up and running with some of the exercises that we've done, especially the strength test, because that's going to be important as we go along. But I think now's a good time to talk about what I mean about happiness, because I'm going to be talking about it a lot, so that we're all kind of on the same page. Now, in Stitch Your Own Silver Linings, you see, this is why I'll never be a millionaire. I'm just not a salesperson. I should have a book right here, shouldn't I? Or a huge poster behind me or something. Anyway, never mind. So anyway, in the book, I give a concrete definition of what positive psychologists at the time gave us of what happiness means. Now, I think in the years since the book was published, they've probably refined this definition a little bit, but I like this one. So, happiness is living a flourishing and fulfilling life, experiencing positive emotions most of the time. Notice, not all of the time. As I've said to you before, negative emotions are important to us. It's important that we sometimes feel angry or fearful, and natural that we feel sad. So we're not kind of aiming for that happy, clappy, always cheerful kind of happiness, because A, it doesn't exist, and B, can you imagine living with someone who was totally upbeat the whole time? No, it wouldn't be natural. So we need negative emotions. So happiness is also subjective, isn't it? It's personal, because what would help you to feel as though you were flourishing and fulfilled would be different to that which would make me feel the same, and the next person, and so on. So I use the term happiness levels a lot, and I use it for this reason. As I said, what makes you happy is not going to make me happy, and we're all at different levels of happiness. So what makes that difference then between people's happiness and what determines happiness anyway are questions that we're going to be answering as we go along. But in terms of what causes the differences between happiness then, Sonja Lyubomirsky, who's a very highly respected scientist in the positive psychology world, came up with what she called the 40% solution. This is about 10 years ago now, and since then the studies have been replicated hundreds and hundreds of times, and they're coming up with the same results. So it's incredibly exciting, and it's also going to surprise you a little bit. I think it certainly did me. So 50% of the difference between you and another person's happiness levels, for example, it comes from what's called your genetically determined set point, or base level point of happiness, which apparently is a level that you will return to even after, major setbacks or incredibly positive experiences. You will tend to return to what they call this base level of happiness. It comes from your parents, so it's inherited. Basically, this is what genetically determined set point really means. It's inherited from your parents, your mother, your father, or a combination of both. So that takes care of 50%. Now, your life circumstances obviously play a part in how happy you are and the difference between your happiness and someone else's. But it doesn't play such a major role as you might think. And this is the shocking part, at least it was for me, because your life circumstances only account for 10% of that difference. 10%. Now, I know that sounds unbelievable until you start to unravel it a bit, because What we're talking about here is what's called adaptation, and it's referring to the idea that we adapt to our life circumstances, both good and bad. Now obviously it's difficult for me to go into detail in such a short video. I do go into more detail in Silver Linings, and if you Google adaptation, it will explain to you in more detail. But an example I always like to give is of adaptation to circumstances. When I was a little girl, I dreamt that when I grew up, I would live in a stone cottage in the countryside. I loved stone walls. I know, weird, or whatever you want to call me. I still love stone walls. Anyway, as I say, it was a lifelong wish that I was going to live in the countryside. And eventually I did get my stone cottage in the countryside. And I just knew that once I was living in my stone cottage, I would be happy forevermore. So I got the cottage, and indeed I was blissfully happy. For about 2 months maybe, before I started to think, maybe it's not so perfect after all. Perhaps we need to do this to it or that to it to make it better and better and better, and so on. And then it wasn't long before living in the stone cottage became the norm. I'm sure you have your own versions of this, but it's just about the fact that we are able to adapt to our circumstances. In terms of material wealth, we only have to look at people who win the lottery and win millions of dollars, who are kind of a month down the line no happier after the win than they were before. And of course, quite a few of them were less happy. So that's what this adaptation's about, and that's why it only accounts for 10% of the difference between happiness levels. So we've got 50% inherited, 10% life circumstances. That leaves us with 40%. And this is the 40% solution. This is the most exciting part, and this is what we're interested in on the Happy Stuff and Fluff channel, because the remaining 40% is determined by your thoughts, feelings and actions. Why this is exciting is because you are in control of your thoughts, feelings and actions. Now I know it isn't easy, of course it isn't easy. It's easy to say, it's not easy to do, to be in control of your thoughts, feelings and actions, but that's what we can work on. And it accounts for a full 40%. So even if you consider yourself, and I've heard some people say this, I'm just not a happy person. That's the way I am. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. We've got this full 40% that we can work on to change, because this is where we can change our thoughts, feelings and actions and start to increase our happiness levels. And that's, as I say, what we're going to be doing on the Happy Stuff and Fluff channel. Now, thanks to the new sciences such as positive psychology, the behavioural sciences, neuroscience, we now know, or we can now physically measure what makes people happy, or how happy they are, what makes them happy and what makes them happier. Because of course now we can study the brain, for example, while it's actually functioning, and that's only happened in the last probably 15 to 20 years or so. Before then, studying the brain, we had to study the brain of cadavers, which means the brain wasn't functioning anyway. And now, thanks to the fMRI scans, we can actually see what's going on in the brain when we're having these positive emotions or these happy feelings. Now, I keep talking about positive psychology, assuming that everybody knows what it is. You may not know what it is, and so for that reason, I'll just give you this brief definition. And we will be talking about it in more depth. But positive psychology is simply defined as the scientific study of the strengths that enable individuals and communities to thrive. And so with that combined with our happiness definition, positive psychology is helping us to achieve this flourishing and fulfilment that we're talking about as a definition of happiness. So that's what we're going to be doing in a nutshell. Now I know I've fired a lot at you there, and perhaps some of it you disagree with or don't understand. Ask the questions, if I can answer them, I will. It is difficult to talk about big subjects in 5 to 10 minutes or so. So, you know, I will be talking in more detail as we go along. Now, for the next video, someone who downloaded the free chapter, which is actually my story, has asked me, will I talk about it? And, you know, again, maybe I should have done this before now, because I've been asking you to do exercises and tests and so on, and you don't really know who I am or what my story is or what I'm actually doing here and why I'm so passionate about your happiness and my own, of course. So I do think it's time I probably did tell you a little bit about who I am and where I'm coming from. So I'm going to do that in the next video. In the meantime, I hope that's been helpful to you, or at least let you know what I mean when I talk about happiness, so that we can all get a greater understanding of what we're all talking about. Okay, so thank you very much for listening. And until the next time, remember, on the Happy Stuff and Fluff channel, we are growing happy and getting younger, or even getting happy and growing younger. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.